Welcome to a new video regarding the conjugation on the present tense. I'm not gonna stay too long and talk in that accent as I usually do because this one is a quick one. Why? Because we talk about the third conjugation. What's special about the third conjugation is that it's actually very simple. Definitely the simplest out of all four of them. If you consider the A, E, EA, and a fourth conjugation with I and E. As always, there are a couple of weird things happening, as it is with anything in Romanian. But as you know, verbs that you learn in the first week in Romanian, like merge or duce, they are quite easy, right? That's why in this video, I'll go against the clock to try to explain everything as quickly as possible. On the other hand, if you're new to the Romanian Academy and you don't know what we're doing here, we have already the first 4 episodes in this season regarding present tense of the verbs in Romanian, so maybe you want to check that out. Also, we have many other videos including culture, tips, tricks, and grammar related videos. It's all organized under different playlists. And also, if you want to get in touch, if you're interested in learning Romanian better, go ahead and check the Calendly link down in the description. Oh boy, this is going to be interesting. Let's go. Verbs in third conjugation. Verbe la conjugarea a treia. Verbe care se termină în e. Verbs that end in e. Let's move straight into the caveats and what you have to know before you're learning them. Now, first thing first, the third conjugation is the easiest because it has the least variation. It has the least irregularity. It has also a very straightforward way to conjugate into the 6th person. You don't have to know 2 different conjugations. You don't have to know, for example, as it was in the conjugation 1, 2 variants, one with EZ and one with no conjugation. There's just plain and simple. And point 2 here follows very well and covers exactly the next bit. Since it's such an easy conjugation, it follows very closely conjugation 2, conjugarea a doua, the verbs that end in ea. They are extremely similar. They are basically one and the same. There are just like some slight variations between them, and somebody at some point decided in the Romanian literature, grammar, linguistics department to change and split the 2 into EA and E. But they're basically the same. There's just a lot of irregular ones in conjugation 2, the ones in EA, and way less in this one. And caveat number 3, only one irregularity. We'll see in a bit more about it, but they're basically verbs that end in N, E. Do you know any verb that ends in an E? Ține, for example, is one of them, to hold. Maybe one of the more common ones that you would use. But if you don't know how to conjugate that, wait until a bit later. Now, after you know all this, let's move to the principle. The principles are exactly the same as any other conjugation. You need the root, which, let's take one of the easiest verbs in conjugation 3, merge. Do you know the root and what that is? Well, if you don't know what the root is, basically is the verb without the ending of that specific conjugation. What conjugation are we talking about today? Third. What's the distinguishable letter that is at the end? E. So the root in this situation is merg. That's how you start conjugating a verb in third person, as well as in, basically for all the conjugations you need first the root. Then for part 2, the only conjugation pattern is a no ending pattern. Exactly what I said at the beginning. If you know how to conjugate the second in the second conjugation, the ones that end in EA, it's extremely similar. And now, knowing that, it's very easy to go through them because you have the first, person, and then you use that with the endings for different persons to use the whole verb, to basically conjugate the whole verb, to go from eu to tu, to el ia, to noi, to voi, and to ei ele. After that, as this conjugation is so similar to the EA, obviously the third person plural, the one that takes the same form as the one in first person singular, eu, or the third person singular, el ia, it will be actually in the situation as the eu, because the verbs ending in EA, they use exactly the same pattern. I talk a lot about patterns in this season, and it is for a very important reason, because the only way to conjugate properly the present tense is if you spot those patterns. That's why principle 3, even though it might be obvious or you might have not thought about that, I would really highly suggest check that out and maybe make yourself aware of it. Cool, now that we know principles, we draw badly on this whiteboard. No, we don't do that. We go to see some real cool stuff. Now, the biggest variation in verbs in third conjugation, so I will say that again, among all the verbs in the third conjugation that end in E, not in EA, not in I, not in U, in E, in the Romanian E, there is roughly no irregularity. But there is one tiny detail that you should keep in mind for later on. Now, what is that thing that you should know is the types of verbs in this conjugation are different not because of their present tense, but because of the participle, which is commonly used in the past tense, the am mers, for example. So this is why I do those distinctions here between the three, because depending on where these verbs are in the third conjugation and its respective group, they will not have a variation at all in the, or any irregularity in the present tense, but they will have a difference, like they will be different in the participle. For example, începe, if you want to say I started, it would be am început. If you want to say I burnt, you say am ars. And if you want to say I baked, you would say kopt. But this P here is a bit strange. So another example, here you have fiert, frânt. So it's actually an irregularity for aquace here, the P, but more often than not is actually just T for this one. So U, T, S, and T. I'm not going to get into much into this because we're talking about present tense, not about participle. Right, so now that we know about this, and that again, there is no real distinction in the present tense, let's have a look at the conjugation. Yes, you see very well here, there are some irregular verbs, and I mentioned that at the beginning, the ține, for example. We'll get that in a moment. Till then, maybe you should consider noting those down. They're quite useful. You have the translation here, what they mean, and they will follow the very same pattern in conjugation 3, the one that we're talking about today. All of the verbs in those three groups are quite important and quite popular and used. For example, looking at a plânge and a râde, well, you do a lot of that if you watch the last episode in the Romanian Academy, one talking about the baccalaureate. Quite an interesting cultural enigma that you might discover some fun stuff about. Link is just here. So the conjugation 3, maybe you recognize this from conjugation 2. With EA, it's exactly the same. No conjugation, no ending, yeah? So no ending in eu, I, E, M, ets, no conjugation in the third person plural. As always, you have in blue the persons that match. And let's go ahead and see how a verb in the third conjugation looks like. I mentioned earlier plânge, and you should give it a go maybe before we start together. But given the principles, you should know that first you take the root and you match it for the eu form. So eu plâng means I cry. Tu plângi. Plâng, plângi, plânge, plângem, plângeți, plâng. That would be a very easy way to conjugate a verb in third person, as long as it's regular. As I have mentioned previously, it's verbs in, that doesn't look like an N, that looks like a W. So let's make an NE. Yeah, so that means an irregular verb for the third conjugation. It needs to end in NE. So I have a few verbs for you that I will put just here. Those are some verbs that end in NE. Maybe let's make that. Right, so a ține, to hold, to keep. A reține, to retain, so used for objects or information. Întreține, to maintain. Susține, to support, both as a help in terms of a building, for example, or to support a team or a friend. A pune, to put. A supune, to comply. A expune, to exhibit, or to exhibit or to manifest. A suprapune, to overlap. So all of those, given what I said here, the biggest difference is that in second person you remove the N and you add the I, right? So you shouldn't be afraid if you have verbs that end in double I, right? You will end up with the following form. So you have țin, because you get the root, and then here you don't have țin, you have ți. Is the only change actually that happens, but it is very important to know because it's very different than the other one. By other one, I mean the regular. So țineți, țin. And all of them respect the same rule. In the second person, it will be reții, întreții, susții, pui, supui, expui, suprapui. So that's about it. There's really not much more to say. This conjugation is extremely easy, and we can just quickly go back and check out all this. So conjugation 3, easiest conjugation, verbs end in E. Follows conjugation 2, the one in EA. There's only one irregularity, verbs that end in NE. You should know the root, that all the verbs in this conjugation follow a no ending pattern. We will see in the next video of this season that with verbs in I or the ones in the fourth conjugation, you will get for each of them 2 different patterns. And the ele form is the same as the O form. Now, there are some distinctions between the types of the verbs in this conjugation, but not related to the present tense, but to how you build the participle. That I said earlier, it's useful because you know how to do the past using the participle, but also many adjectives are made with the participle. For example, if something is burnt, you use ars, which is the participle. If something is open, you use deschis, and so on. And then this is how you conjugate the 2 distinct types of verbs in this conjugation, the regular and irregular, in present tense. Well, that was about it in this video. I hope you enjoyed it and you found it informative. This was basically conjugation 3, the easiest one, the one that can be explained and learned quite quickly. In the next video on this season, we will talk about conjugation 4, the one that has verbs ending in I or U. Not yet sure if it's going to be 1 video or 2 video, but I know it's an important topic and I know it's a very difficult one to get when you start learning the present tense in Romanian and verbs. So I will try to get it as in detail as possible. If you appreciated this video and you like what we do here at the Romanian Academy, give us a like and a subscribe down below, because on 100 subscribers, we will make a new video, a new cultural video covering one of the most famous Romanian dishes. Not yet decided, but might be sarmale. Also, it might be something to do with a review or something funny. Not yet sure, but if you want to know more about it, check the last video in the cultural season, the one that talks about the Romanian baccalaureate. That is very different than most of the videos on this channel. It's more fun, it's more about culture, it's about the hard truths in the Romanian culture, and less about grammar. Well, that said, off you go. I'll see you in the next one. La revedere!